They finally got me in July 2024 after half a century of running the largest drug trafficking organization in the Western Hemisphere. 76 years old, tired, diabetic, my body failing, but my mind still sharp enough to see the betrayal coming. Joaquin Guzman Lopez, one of El Chapo's sons, the kid I helped raise after his father's arrest, delivered me like a gift to American authorities. Flew me across the border in a private plane straight into the hands of federal agents in El Paso, Texas. The media called it a stunning capture, the end of an era, justice finally served. But sitting in this cell in Brooklyn's Metropolitan Detention Center, waiting for trial, I find myself laughing at the irony. They think they caught me. They think this is their victory. They have no idea that I've been inside their system for longer than most of these prosecutors have been alive. My name is Ismael Zambada Garcia, but the world knows me as El Mayo, and I'm about to tell you how I bought the New York Federal Prosecutor's Office, piece by piece, soul by soul. People ask how I survived when everyone else fell. El Chapo, caught and extradited. The Arellano Felix brothers, dead or imprisoned. Ociel Cardenas, Arturo Beltran Leiva, Vicente Carrillo Fuentes, all the big names from my generation, all gone. But El Mayo, the old man from the mountains of Sinaloa, kept operating, kept trafficking tons of cocaine and heroin and methamphetamine into the United States, kept making billions, kept his freedom for over 50 years. The DEA called me a ghost. The Mexican government claimed I was a myth. The media speculated that I lived in the Sierra Madre Mountains, constantly moving, protected by corrupt officials and loyal gunmen. And all of that was partially true. But the real secret to my longevity wasn't hiding in mountains or bribing Mexican politicians. It was understanding something fundamental about the American justice system. Everyone has a price. Everyone. And if you pay the right people in the right places, you don't need to hide at all. It started in the early 1990s when the Colombian cartels were falling apart and we Mexicans were taking over the cocaine trafficking business. The Americans were celebrating their victories against Pablo Escobar and the Cali cartel, but they didn't realize they were just creating opportunities for us. We controlled the border, we controlled the smuggling routes, and suddenly we controlled the entire supply chain from South America to American cities. The money was astronomical. We were moving tons of cocaine every month, making hundreds of millions of dollars. And with that kind of money, you can buy anything. Politicians, police, military commanders, judges. In Mexico, this was standard business practice. Everyone knew the system ran on bribes. But I realized something my partners didn't fully understand. The American system was just as corrupt. It was just more expensive and more carefully hidden. The approach had to be subtle. You couldn't just walk up to an American federal prosecutor and hand them a suitcase full of cash. They had oversight, internal affairs, FBI counterintelligence watching for exactly that kind of obvious corruption. So you had to be smarter. You had to find their weaknesses, their vulnerabilities, their secrets. Everyone has something they want to hide. An affair, a gambling problem, a drug habit, financial difficulties, a compromising photograph, a youthful mistake that could destroy their career. You find that pressure point, and then you apply pressure slowly, carefully, until they understand they have no choice but to cooperate. Or you find the ones who are already corrupt, already taking money from other criminals, already compromised. Those are the easiest. They've already crossed the line. Working for a cartel instead of a street gang is just a matter of scale. My first real asset in the New York Prosecutor's Office came in 1994. I won't use his real name, even now. Let's call him Mr. Smith. He was a junior prosecutor, ambitious, talented, frustrated by his salary and his student loan debt. He was handling a case against one of our distributors in the Bronx, a Dominican crew that moved cocaine for us. The case was solid. They had wiretaps, surveillance, cooperating witnesses. Our distributor was looking at 20 years. Mr. Smith had a girlfriend who was expensive, high maintenance, the kind of woman who expected designer clothes and fancy restaurants. He couldn't afford her on a prosecutor's salary. So we made an offer through an intermediary, someone who couldn't be traced back to us. $50,000 cash to lose one piece of evidence, a surveillance video that showed our distributor at a specific location. Just one video misplaced, one file gone missing. The case would still proceed, but it would be weaker, defendable. Mr. Smith thought about it for 2 weeks. I imagine the sleepless nights, the moral calculations, the rationalizations. He probably told himself it was just one time, that 50,000 would solve his immediate problems, that he'd never do it again. They all tell themselves that, and then he did it. The video disappeared from the evidence locker, the case proceeded to trial, and our distributor's lawyers shredded the prosecution's timeline. Reasonable doubt, acquittal, Mr. Smith got his money, paid off some debts, kept his girlfriend happy, and more importantly, we now owned him. Because that first compromise, that first betrayal of his oath, that created leverage. We had proof of what he'd done. If he ever tried to actually prosecute us properly, if he ever grew a conscience, we could destroy his career and send him to prison. So when we came back to him 6 months later with another request, he complied, and then another, and another. Over the years, Mr. Smith rose through the ranks, became a senior prosecutor, handled major cases, and the entire time he was ours. But one corrupted prosecutor wasn't enough. The federal system has checks and balances, multiple prosecutors on major cases, supervisors reviewing decisions, FBI agents who might question why certain leads weren't pursued. So we expanded the operation. Through the 1990s and 2000s, we identified and compromised multiple people in the system, not just prosecutors, but also FBI agents, DEA agents, court clerks, police detectives, defense attorneys who reported back to us about their clients who might cooperate with authorities. We built a network that spanned the entire judicial infrastructure of New York's Southern District, one of the most important jurisdictions for drug trafficking cases. And the beauty of it was that most of these people didn't even know about each other. They each thought they were the only one compromised, which made them easier to control and less likely to talk. The methods varied depending on the target. Some were bought with simple cash payments, routed through offshore accounts and shell companies to hide the money trail. Some were blackmailed with evidence of affairs or other misconduct. Some were compromised through ego, fed information that made them look like brilliant investigators while actually steering them away from us and toward our competitors. And some, the most valuable ones, were true believers in the corruption. They looked at the failed war on drugs, the billions of dollars spent, the millions of people imprisoned, and they concluded that the system was broken and futile. So why not make some money from it? Why not take bribes from the cartels that were going to move drugs regardless of what law enforcement did? These were the most dangerous assets because they had rationalized their betrayal. They didn't feel guilty. They felt pragmatic. The practical benefits were enormous. When the DEA or FBI built cases against our operations, we knew about them from the inside. We knew which phones were tapped, which shipments were being watched, which cooperating witnesses were talking. We could adjust our operations in real time, reroute shipments, eliminate informants before they became problems, destroy evidence before it could be collected. When they did manage to arrest our people, we had prosecutors who would offer sweetheart plea deals, who would mishandle evidence, who would fail to file charges in time. And when cases did go to trial, we had clerks who could provide us with jury information, allowing us to intimidate or bribe specific jurors. The system wasn't just failing to catch us. The system was actively helping us. But the real value went beyond just avoiding prosecution. We used our corrupted prosecutors as weapons against our enemies. The Sinaloa Cartel has always been sophisticated about eliminating competition, and having federal prosecutors on our payroll added a powerful tool to our arsenal. When rival cartels tried to expand into our territories, we would feed information about them to our assets in the prosecutor's office. Suddenly, the Juarez Cartel would face major indictments. The Tijuana Cartel would see their top leaders arrested and extradited. Los Zetas would get hit with massive conspiracy charges based on evidence we had provided. The American justice system became our own personal weapon, destroying our enemies while leaving us untouched. The irony was beautiful. The United States government, with its billions in drug war funding, was unknowingly working for the Sinaloa Cartel. The system worked flawlessly for decades. While El Chapo got arrested and escaped and got arrested again, grabbing headlines and attention, I operated quietly in the background, protected by layers of corruption and carefully cultivated relationships. The few times American authorities got close to me, mysterious problems would arise with their investigations. Evidence would be deemed inadmissible. Witnesses would recant or disappear. Surveillance operations would be compromised before they could gather useful intelligence. And the prosecutors who might have pursued me aggressively would find themselves reassigned to other cases, their careers subtly derailed by supervisors who had their own reasons to protect me. I became untouchable not through violence or hiding, but through corruption so deep it had become structural. El Chapo's final arrest and extradition in 2017 was a watershed moment. My partner of decades was gone, facing life in an American supermax prison. Many people expected the Sinaloa Cartel to collapse or splinter. Instead, we thrived. With El Chapo gone, I became the undisputed leader, and the organization ran more smoothly than ever. Why? Because El Chapo's style was flashy, violent, dramatic. He escaped from prison twice, he fought wars with rival cartels, he gave interviews to actors and journalists. He drew attention. My style was the opposite. Quiet, patient, strategic. I understood that the best way to win a war is to never let your enemy know they're fighting you. And my weapons weren't just guns and sicarios. My weapons were corrupted prosecutors, bought agents, and a judicial system I had spent decades infiltrating. The specific names and details of who we corrupted would fill volumes. There was the FBI agent who fed us information about ongoing investigations in exchange for monthly payments of $10,000. There was the court clerk who provided us with sealed indictments before they were made public, giving us time to move money and people out of reach. There was the defense attorney who supposedly represented cartel members, but actually reported everything to us, allowing us to identify which defendants might cooperate and eliminate them before they could testify. There was the DEA supervisor who assigned his agents to investigate our competitors while assuring his superiors that the Sinaloa Cartel was a low priority. And there were the prosecutors, multiple prosecutors, who buried evidence, lost files, offered lenient deals, and steered investigations away from anyone connected to me. The cost of maintaining this network was substantial, tens of millions of dollars every year in bribes, payments, and benefits. But it was the best investment we ever made. The return on that investment was operational freedom worth billions. We moved cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine, and fentanyl through the United States with near impunity. When shipments were occasionally seized, we knew about it in advance and had already written off that product and moved the valuable loads through other routes. When arrests happened, they hit lower-level operators we considered expendable, never touching the core leadership. The American public and politicians would see arrests and seizures on the news and think the drug war was working, while the reality was that we controlled the tempo and targets of enforcement efforts through our corrupted assets in the system. The irony of cooperating witnesses was particularly amusing. The American justice system relies heavily on cartel members who flip and testify against their former partners. The most famous was Jesus Zambada Niebla, my own son, who cooperated with American authorities after his arrest, or Damaso Lopez Nunez, El Chapo's former right hand, or Vicente Zambada Niebla, my other son. These testimonies were supposed to destroy the cartel leadership, and they did hurt El Chapo, leading to evidence used in his trial, but they barely touched me. Why? Because the prosecutors controlled which questions were asked and which topics were pursued. Our assets in the system made sure that testimony was directed at El Chapo, at other rivals, at anyone but me. Cooperating witnesses would start to talk about my role, and suddenly prosecutors would steer the conversation elsewhere. It wasn't magic, it was corruption at work. But nothing lasts forever. The network started showing cracks in the early 2020s. A new generation of prosecutors and agents came in. ones we hadn't identified or compromised yet. Internal affairs investigations within the FBI and DEA started catching some of our paid assets. One of our corrupted prosecutors got caught taking bribes from a different criminal organization. And when he went down, he hinted at other corruption without giving specific names. The new U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York was reportedly incorruptible, a true believer in the system, and he started cleaning house. Some of our most valuable assets retired early or were quietly forced out. The network that had taken decades to build started falling apart. My age became a factor too. I'm 76 years old now, diabetic, suffering from various health problems that come with decades of stress and irregular medical care. The young generation of cartel leadership, El Chapo's sons and others, didn't fully understand or appreciate the corruption network I had built. They were more focused on violence and territorial control, on flashy displays of power, on the old ways of doing business. They didn't understand that the real power wasn't in how many sicarios you commanded, but in how many prosecutors you owned. And without my constant attention and careful management, the corruption network weakened. People retired or left their positions without being replaced. The institutional knowledge of who was compromised and how to contact them was lost. My capture in 2024 was the result of that deterioration. Joaquin Guzman Lopez, one of El Chapo's sons, betrayed me as part of a deal with American authorities. He lured me onto a plane under false pretenses and delivered me straight to federal agents. I knew it was happening as it was happening, but I was old and tired, and frankly, a part of me was relieved. 50 years of looking over your shoulder, of managing corruption networks, of ordering deaths, of living in paranoia. It wears you down. Even victory feels hollow after that long. So I let it happen. I got on the plane, I flew across the border, I surrendered to the arrest. And now I'm here in Brooklyn, in the same courthouse where El Chapo was tried and convicted, facing the same prosecutor's office I spent decades corrupting. The government thinks they're finally going to get justice, that they're going to make an example of me, that my trial will demonstrate the reach of American law enforcement. But they have no idea what they're actually dealing with. The corruption I installed in their system didn't disappear just because I got arrested. There are still people in positions of power who owe their careers to me, who took my money, who can't afford for the full truth to come out. The evidence against me is substantial. Wiretaps and financial records and testimony from cooperating witnesses. But watch what happens to that evidence. Watch what gets deemed inadmissible. Watch what witnesses suddenly become unavailable or recant. Watch what plea deals get offered. The system will protect itself, even if that means protecting me in the process. I'm writing this confession from my cell because I know the trial will be a farce. The government will claim victory regardless of the outcome. If I'm convicted, they'll say justice prevailed. If charges are reduced or dismissed, they'll blame technicalities. But the reality is that I won a long time ago. For over 50 years, I ran the largest drug trafficking organization in the world while being actively hunted by the most powerful law enforcement apparatus in history. And I did it not by hiding, not by fighting, but by corrupting the very system designed to catch me. The New York Federal Prosecutor's Office wasn't my enemy. It was my asset. And even now, even in custody, even facing trial, I'm not worried. Because the people I bought are still there, still in positions of power, still compromised. The war on drugs is a joke, a trillion-dollar failure that accomplished nothing except filling prisons and enriching cartels. But the real joke is that it was never meant to succeed. Too many people benefit from the status quo. Law enforcement agencies get funding and power. Politicians get tough on-crime credentials. Cartels get enormous profits from prohibition. And people in the middle, people like the prosecutors and agents I corrupted, they get to profit from both sides. They collect government salaries while taking cartel bribes. They pretend to fight crime while enabling it. They build careers on high-profile arrests while making sure the most important targets stay free. The system isn't broken. It's working exactly as designed for the people who control it. My only regret is that I won't live to see how this all ends. The fentanyl crisis is destroying American communities, killing 100,000 people every year. Mexican cartels are more powerful and violent than ever, controlling not just drugs but human trafficking, extortion, kidnapping. The corruption I helped install has spread beyond the prosecutor's office to police departments, border patrol, politicians at every level. And the American public still believes in the myth of the justice system, still thinks their government is fighting the good fight against evil drug lords. They have no idea that the drug lords aren't the enemy of the system. We're part of it. We're shareholders in the same criminal enterprise, just working different sides of the border. If you're reading this and you're shocked, if you think I'm exaggerating or lying to make myself look smart, I understand your skepticism. The corruption I'm describing sounds impossible in America, the land of law and justice and constitutional rights. But ask yourself this: how did I stay free for 50 years while being one of the most wanted criminals in the world? How did the Sinaloa Cartel continue operating and growing even while other cartels fell? How did I avoid the fate of El Chapo, who was captured 3 times and will die in prison? Luck? I'm not that lucky. Skill? I'm skilled, but not superhuman. The only logical explanation is systematic corruption at the highest levels. And if you still don't believe me, watch my trial. Watch what evidence is presented and what is mysteriously excluded. Watch what questions are asked and what topics are avoided. Watch what sentence I receive compared to what I should receive. And then decide if I'm lying. The prosecutors who will try me are probably reading this confession right now, trying to figure out how to handle it. They'll want to dismiss it as the ravings of an old man trying to justify his crimes, trying to bring down others with him. They'll investigate my claims, interview current and former prosecutors, look for evidence of corruption. And they'll find nothing, not because the corruption doesn't exist, but because the corrupted officials are good at hiding their tracks. Offshore accounts in countries with bank secrecy laws, cash payments that leave no paper trail, compromising information kept in safe deposit boxes or with trusted intermediaries. The evidence of corruption is there, but proving it in court is nearly impossible. And the people who might investigate most aggressively are themselves compromised, creating a perfect circular protection. Some of the people I corrupted are probably dead now, retired, moved on to other careers. But some are still there, still in positions of power, still vulnerable to exposure. They're reading this confession with growing panic, wondering if I'm going to name names, if I kept records, if there's physical evidence that could prove what I'm claiming. Let me ease your minds. I'm not going to name you specifically. I'm not going to provide detailed evidence that would allow internal affairs to build cases against you. Why? Because I'm 76 years old, facing life in prison, and I have nothing to gain from burning everything down. But more importantly, because your continued freedom is my insurance policy. As long as you're out there, compromised and vulnerable, you have every reason to make sure my trial doesn't reveal too much. You need to protect yourselves, which means protecting me. The mythology of drug lords always focuses on violence and power. Pablo Escobar with his bombs and assassinations, El Chapo with his dramatic prison escapes, the Zetas with their paramilitary tactics. But the real power in this business never came from violence. It came from corruption. Escobar died in a shootout because he relied on violence. El Chapo was in prison because he was too visible. The Zetas fell apart because they were too brutal, too unsustainable. But I stayed free for half a century because I understood the real game. You don't beat the system with guns. You beat it by making the system work for you. You buy the prosecutors, the agents, the judges. You corrupt the institutions until they serve your interests. And you do it so carefully, so subtly, that most people never realize it's happening. Looking back on my life, I'm not sure what I feel. Pride, guilt, regret, satisfaction, maybe all of it at once. I built an empire and lived to old age, which is more than most people in this business can say. I provided for my family, employed thousands of people, accumulated more wealth than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. But I also contributed to the addiction and death of millions of people. I corrupted institutions that were supposed to protect society. I helped turn the American dream into the American nightmare for communities destroyed by drugs. And I bought prosecutors who were supposed to uphold justice, turning them into accomplices in one of the largest criminal enterprises in history. Was it worth it? I don't know anymore. But I did it, and I'd probably do it again, because the alternative was being poor and powerless in the mountains of Sinaloa. The story of Ismael El Mayo Zambada will be told for generations. Some will call me a monster, others will call me a genius. The truth is, I'm just a man who understood how systems work and how to exploit them. The American justice system, for all its noble rhetoric about equal justice and the rule of law, is just as corruptible as any other system. You just need enough money and enough patience. I had both, and I used them to turn the New York Federal Prosecutor's Office into an asset for the Sinaloa Cartel. The prosecutors who chase drug lords, the agents who investigate cartels, the judges who sentence traffickers. Some of them were on my payroll. Not all of them, not even most of them, but enough. Enough to make me untouchable for 50 years. Enough to make the difference between life in prison and dying free. My trial will be a spectacle, a final act in a long career. The government will present their evidence. Cooperating witnesses will testify. Prosecutors will give passionate speeches about justice and accountability. And maybe I'll be convicted, sentenced to life in prison like El Chapo. Or maybe, just maybe, something will go wrong with the prosecution's case. Evidence will be suppressed. Witnesses will be discredited. Constitutional violations will be found. And I'll walk away, one last time, protected by the very system that's supposed to destroy me. Either way, I win, because the truth is already out there in this confession. I corrupted the New York Federal Prosecutor's Office. I bought prosecutors and agents. I turned the justice system into a tool for the cartel. And even if I die in prison, that legacy remains. The corruption I installed will outlast me, will continue functioning long after I'm gone, will protect the next generation of cartel leaders just like it protected me. They say justice is blind, that the law applies equally to everyone, that in America no one is above the law. But I know better, I've lived better. For 50 years I was above the law because I owned the people who enforced it. I bought justice, purchased it like any other commodity, and it served me faithfully. The New York Federal Prosecutor's Office was supposed to be the tip of the spear in the war on drugs, the elite institution that would bring down the cartels and stop the flow of narcotics into American cities. Instead, it became my greatest asset, my ultimate protection, the key to my survival and success. And the beautiful thing, the perfect irony, is that most of the prosecutors who worked there over those 50 years had no idea. They were honest, dedicated, hardworking. But they were working alongside corrupted colleagues, taking direction from compromised supervisors, building cases that were being sabotaged from within. The corruption was invisible to them, hidden in plain sight, destroying their efforts while they believed they were winning the war. This is the truth they don't want you to know. The war on drugs isn't just failing, it's a fraud. And people like me, people who understood how to corrupt the system from within, we didn't just survive in spite of American law enforcement. We survived because of it. The prosecutors, the agents, the entire apparatus of justice became our tools, our weapons, our protection. I didn't beat the system, I bought it. And that's how Ismael El Mayo Zambada stayed free for 50 years while being the most wanted drug lord in the world. Not through violence, not through hiding, through corruption so deep and so pervasive that the system itself became complicit in my crimes. That's my confession, that's my legacy, and that's the truth that will haunt the justice system long after I'm dead and forgotten.